Hey everybody, this is founder Laerun, and I'm here with Lady Shel, and we are going to do our show Fantasy Grounds Unity A through Z, episode 6. Hey Shel, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's a beautiful Sunday, and I hope it's nice by you too.
It's not too bad. It's a little cloudy. It might rain, but so what are we going to get into today?
We are going to talk about the DM side of things, and we're going to talk about setting up your table as a DM, choosing the options for your game, and we'll be doing a little bit of talking about extensions, what extensions we think is something you might want to have, and how many is too many. And lastly, we're going to talk about when you buy content, either from Fantasy Grounds or the third party sites, where will you find that in your account or how do you get there? So take it away, Leroon.
All right, first things first. Hello everybody. Hopefully everything's doing well for you. I'm going to first lay out the table as a game master, which I kind of go over this every time I do a show. Yeah, I think it's really important that you do this and you learn how important it is. So, first things first, normally when you first start your table, you'll get a pop up on your campaign setup. Well, if you dismiss that window, this is pretty much what you're left with. The only thing that I have customized so far are the color of my dice. So, if you want to change the color of your dice, you come up to the top right of the interface. There's a little color palette. If you click on that, you can adjust the different colors according to your tastes. If players do this and they don't have a character claimed yet, it will not show up until they have actually built or claimed a character. So just kind of a heads up on that. But I went ahead and made brown, which is probably the hardest color to make with uh, with the color wheel. It's basically all three shades of the colors put together to make that color, plus a little bit of black in there to kind of darken it up a little. So it's up to you what you want for dice color. But as you can see, it's nice and brown with white letters. So you have white and black font for your numbers. Also, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the combat tracker, and you can also resize this chat window accordingly. So if you right click on it and you unlock it, it will basically allow you to move it. But if it's locked, you won't be able to manipulate it. But you manipulate it from the bottom right corner of the frame, and you can pretty much size it any way you want. But I usually just kind of leave it loosely here for now until I get up the combat tracker. And that'll be next. That's these two swords that are crossed. When I open this up, as you can see, there's already some combatants on here. I'm going to go ahead and if I want to clear those for any reason, I can go to menu and hit delete from tracker, and you can click on delete only foes or delete all non-friendly. Well, if you're in a pinch and you need to hurry up and just clear it, right now I have a friendly and a couple enemies. So if you change everybody's status to an enemy or hostile or doesn't even really matter as long as it's not friendly, you can go to menu, click delete from tracker and all non-friendlies, and that will get rid of everything. So that's a quick tip for that. If you want to totally clear everything out instead of individually taking characters off the combat tracker. Normally, when you're playing a campaign, you wouldn't do that. That is something just if you need a clean slate. I'm going to go ahead and clear the chat. And when you get all these different things here, like the statuses and different messages, and you got a big mess here, you can right click on there and click the eraser for clear. And sometimes when you have a bunch of text in here in the chat window, you don't have a right click option because there's too much stuff. So there's a command, right/clear, and you hit enter, and it'll clear the chat for you. So there's two ways you can clear that. Another thing I'm going to do is reset the rounds. So if you go to menu and you go to, you can delete all your effects, you can rest, you can do other options. If you go to rest and you hit long rest, it'll actually reset everything as far as rounds go. There's another, you can do it manually also. Like if you were at round 10, you could type that in, but then you can also type in, round 0 or round 1. That's another way that you can refresh that. And I think in our next episode or soon, we'll be going over the combat tracker more and how all these different functions work. But that's basically what I'll do is I'll layer the combat tracker over the top of the chat window. The next step is the dice tower. You don't have to have it enabled, but if you want to use it, you do have to go into the options and enable it. So one of the things that I usually do is I will open up the options menu, which is this gear cog on the top right corner of Fantasy Grounds, and you'll get the options menu. Now there's two different ways to set this. Now, if you turn on table dice tower on, that means that anybody that's connected to you, they'll see the dice tower and it'll be active. And at that point, they can move it where they want if they right click on it. Now, for you as the game master, at this point, when you roll dice, it is basically hidden by default. As soon as you turn that the dependency on, which is chat show GM rolls on, then when you roll the dice on the regular chat window, it's automatically open and visible. So you have to use the dice tower like your players. So again, if you right click on the dice tower and you unlock it, you can drag and drop it over to the location where you want to put it. In this case, I'll stick it right here underneath everything, and it's right next to the dice. So if I want to do a hidden roll, you can drag and drop it in the dice tower. And you'll be able to see that it's in the dice tower. It's a hidden roll. That's this eyeball with a line through it means. And you'll see the result, and your players will not. So those are the different ways to set up your combat tracker in your chat window. So that's basically the main setup. Next part of the setup is your library. So if you go to the library banner, right now you notice I have nothing enabled. So there's a couple ways. You can come through here and do it, click on modules, or if you have the setup window, which comes up in the beginning, this will actually show you kind of a quick shortcut way of setting things up. This first page is all your wiki user guides, user manuals, the forums, so all your help files are here. You hit next. This is your data modules, which is the same thing as coming into the library and clicking on modules, except for it's a shorter roundabout way of doing it. So I'm going to click on the SRD, which is your basic system reference document rules. So now this just confirms that they're loaded, and you'll see that here in the windows. And then if you wanted to load a module, you can either click on modules on the bottom left, or you can click on modules in the data module activation area. So depending on what you own and what type of rule set you have will depend on what you need to load. Generally, you'll have to load the core rule books. D&D 5e has SRD, and there's other rule sets that have basic rules as well. They're very limited and pared down, but they'll get you through in a pinch. If you wanted to load, let's say, Player's Handbook in this case, I'm going to click on Modules. And then I'm going to search for Player's Handbook. And here it is. So it's shared, or its player load is allowed. And I'm going to go ahead and open it by clicking on the book. And that actually will activate the book. You will be allowed to share the data with your players so they have access to it, especially when they're creating their characters or if they want to switch spells or look up things. So it's important to have at least the core book for the players. And if that's the case, if that's what I have in my load area, if I click on all, it's a filter. And this will only show what I have loaded. So if you have the player's handbook, you no longer need the SRD data. So I could actually close that. Magic items, you could leave that open, and the bestiary, you could leave that open. Because that's your basic monsters, and then these are some collection of magic items from basic magic items from the Dungeon Master's Guide. So that's actually the bare minimum, I think, for any table that's going to run Fantasy Grounds. I mean, you can use the SRD, but building characters is tough because you don't have a lot of options there. You don't have a lot to build off of either. So if you wanted to make your own classes and such, it'd be a little bit harder with the SRD. Not impossible, but just a lot more work. So that is basically how this works. You can find extensions that will change things. Like right now, I have the better module view. But if you wanted to force load books to players, you could do that with this plugin, which allows you to automatically force modules to the player. So this is an extension that is been added on top of the regular rules. So this is something that we'll go over later. But nonetheless, this view of the data modules is different, and this player load manager is also different. What this like I said, this just kind of helps you as a tool to make sure that players have certain books open and available to them, regardless of what they're doing in the background. So that is basically how you load content. When you download content from the DM's Guild, it needs to go in a modules folder within the subdirectories of Fantasy Grounds. And we've covered this before in past videos, but you want to go into the master directory or the data directory of Fantasy Grounds, and then from there you'll see a modules folder, and any modules that you purchase from the DM's Guild or any that you create by hand should go in there, and that is a manual process. So when you download something, technically it's a zip file. It goes into the data modules folder for your access to the games, and then you'll be able to see them in your library and load them. Now, when it comes to official content, once you're licensed and you're registered with the Fantasy Grounds store, and you have your account connected via the software, which is your password and username to the forums, you'll have access to your data that you use to buy and purchase the official books, like the Player's Handbook. Those will get downloaded through the interface. They'll become active when you connect your account if you've purchased the items, and it will pull in anything that you've purchased off the Fantasy Grounds store. And if you have a Paizo account, it'll also pull in that stuff, provided that you have synchronized those. And we cover all that stuff in the first episode of our series, Fantasy Grounds Unity A through Z. Now, if you have content loaded, this is basically what you're going to be using for your campaign. One of the things you want to shy away from, and even though this Unity has got more memory potential, you still don't want to load a ton of content. So if you have a lot of things you're looking at, but you don't necessarily need to use, unload those before you start a campaign, and actually start a whole different campaign for looking at material and such. That way it doesn't interfere with your current campaign. So the only other thing I might want in here is the Lost Mine of Phandelver module, which I will use in this series to illustrate different things as we go along. So if you look up Lost Mine, it's a mine, not mines. It's not plural. But Lost Mine is 2 words. It is not plural. And there are a few different things that I have here, but I would just want to load the Lost Mine of Phandelver. And it's player blocked so that they don't have access to it. Now, that doesn't mean they can't see a map through it that you share, but it's basically keeping them from poking around in it. And then I have two other modules that are third party. I have one that I made that has revised characters, and which you don't really need anymore. I guess Zacchaeus has gone through and fixed all those. So most of the characters that come with Lost Mine of Phandelver has been updated, so that's a good thing. But I used to have a module that I created myself that had revised editions of the starting characters. And then there's a Lost Mines of Phandelver loot that was made by a community member that is sold on the DM's Guild, but I'm not going to load that. So this is just a real basic tutorial on how to get to your books. Once you have them loaded, you have this library view, and in the library view, you'll be able to customize your layout as far as what you have active and what kind of banners you have. So by default, I'm in Game Master mode, but if you were just going to play in a game, you can click player, and that assumes your character's already built and everything. Create PC mode is for building characters or leveling up. And then all is for exploring your content and building things. So it's kind of up to you what mode you're in when you're running or playing, but those are your defaults up here on top. So I'm going to go back to Game Master mode. Now in Game Master mode, you have this library view, and in most cases, the adventures and the core rulebooks and the other supplements, if you click on them, they'll have this list here of all these links. These links are, again, they're links that lead to certain sections within a given supplement or module. In this case, I want to click on the reference manual. And this is your reference manual view of your content. So this is the actual book or PDF that you purchased. And if you click on these chapters, you will get the different segments and sections in the book, just like you would in the hardback. You also have the artwork. It's all laid out in a nice fashion. You have tables and pictures and all kinds of cool stuff. The other thing is you have these directional arrows. So on the bottom, you use those to advance your character or your view of your reference manual. And on the bottom left, you have a search field. So I have languages that I want to look up. And it does help if you spell it right. And here's the spot on languages. So here's the page. It talks about languages and everything that you need to know about it in this rule set. And then I'm going to click on the link up here, and it actually pops the page out. So if I close this on accident or I don't want it in the way anymore, I can close the launcher, I can do my research, or if I want to look at it later, drag and drop this hotkey or down to the hotkeys, and you'll have a shortcut for it. If you close it, then later on when you're building characters, you want to see it again, you can pop it back up. Now, one thing about Windows is when you are using and working with Windows in Fantasy Grounds, you need to keep them where you want them. So in other words, this languages sheet here, if I want this to pop up every time in this location, I need to locate it first and then close it. That way, when you're actually playing and you go, oh, I want to look at that really quick, you pop this up, it comes up where you want it. Then when you don't want it, you can just click on it again, it'll disappear. Same thing with the combat tracker. If you wanted this little bit of space back here, you can click on the button over to the right where the combat tracker, there's two swords. It'll disappear. And you click on it again, it'll come back. Or you can X out of it. And then you click on the button again on the right, and it'll come back. So you want to get in the habit of leaving your windows where they are, if they're in the right location, that is. So that is an important thing that most people struggle with when they first start using Fantasy Grounds. Because what'll happen is you'll have all these different things open and they'll overlap and you won't be able to see something, and then you'll end up moving the other thing that's on top of it so you can see. And then when you close it out, it goes back to where you left it instead of where you want it. So you want to try to open up all the windows where you want them first, and then organize a way to access them, and then you can close them and open them as needed. And that's the trick of managing Fantasy Grounds Tabletop, is actually managing the location of the windows. For example, if I bring up Lady Shel's character, Hiena, this is where I want her character sheet to pop up every time. By default, when you're building, it's generally over here. Once his character is done and you're getting ready to play, we always have it stuck over here, or we try to, and then have it all the way down. It gives me this whole half or at least a third of my screen. The other thing is, once you've gone through this, you can make shortcuts for your initiative. So there, I just drag the initiative down to the bottom. Also, if you wanted to pass your turn or end your turn, you can click on this little arrow that leads down. So when it's your turn, you just click on it. So I'm going to put her on the combat tracker. And I have her selected now. The flag is next to her. It's her turn. When she hits the down arrow, that will pass her turn and it'll go to round 2. So that's just a handy place to put a shortcut. The other thing that we advise people do, and a lot of this is in character creation, but I'll just mention that you could take your skills as well, your top skills. So we'll just say perception is always asked for. So, and then maybe she wants medicine. So those are just things to make the game smoother and quicker for you. Also, if she wanted to look up something for her class, she'll have this little shortcut, and that's her class description. So if she wanted to look something up, what I would do is lay the window out first, probably layer it just like right on top of here or on the side. And then she can scroll down and read and see what she gets per level and spell slots and, you know, all the rules for her character. Once she's done, she can dismiss this if she wants. But before she does, I'll have her make a shortcut. So now when she closes it and she clicks on it, it goes right back where she left it. So it's important to know what you can layer and what stuff you have laid out ahead of time. So this is just part of the setup. If I have NPCs in the combat tracker, I do the same thing. I layer them all together before I start playing. That way I understand who's what and what's where. When their turn comes up in the combat tracker, I will click on this little button here on the far right, which is like a shield, and that brings up the sheet. So if I had another person on the combat tracker and I clicked on that little button, it would bring them up again. So that is how you want to keep this organized. So just keep in mind that your setup is just as important as the content in the game that you're going to run. It's actually paramount. It keeps things smooth, organized, and in the correct spots. You're not constantly have to drag things over. Because what'll happen is, let's just say you have this and you're classing. So once you start doing this, you're going to be going, oh, I can't see this, so I want to move this over here. And then you're reading this and you go, okay, then you'll close that. And you accidentally close that and go, oops, I got to get my character back. And then you move this over here. And then you can double click on the pin here and that will bring back your sheet, but now it's in the wrong place. So you want to keep everything where they're supposed to go. And it's up to you where it goes, but you need to have a home for everything so when it does pop up, you'll know where that is and it won't be invaded into other spots. So this cleric thing, I want to put this back here. So now when you want to look at this stuff, it's in order. So I don't have to keep moving it around. Use the shortcuts down below and the exit. Do not drag these windows all over the place once you have them set up. And that's probably the best advice you're going to get for Fantasy Grounds as far as managing it. And that's true of any rule set, not just D&D. Okay, Shel, what's the next topic? That's setup.
Let me look at my list. We were going to talk about, the token locking. We want to bring up the token locking thing because there was a change in how to do it now.
Okay, good point. So last a couple episodes, we went over token locking, and there's been a revision since then. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up a map. And I know that Lady Shel was on a map. So I'll have to find it again, but it was a swamp map.
You left me in the swamp.
So jungle, swampy, hot, muddy, swampity, swamp.
Can you click on my token to see which map I was on? There you go.
Yeah, I could, but the reason I couldn't at the time because I took you off the combat tracker.
Oh, okay, that's true.
So when you take somebody off the combat tracker, and I took the dragon off and everything else, it breaks the link. So then you have to re-drag them onto the combat tracker. And look at that. The shapes now have a number on it, so you know how large it is. And they're a little bit more pronounced. So that's new also.
That is nice.
So when you make a shape, it now shows with the actual dimension number. So let me right click on the map and click on pointers, and I'm going to remove the pointer. So what this is for when you're targeting with spells. So I'll get into that momentarily. But first, let me put Lady Shel's character on the map. So that's the first thing you do as a game master is once the characters are built, you put them on the combat tracker. Once they're on the combat tracker, then you put them on the map. If you delete the characters from the combat tracker, it also deletes the link to the map. So you'll have to re-drag them all if you mess with the combat tracker. So I'm going to go ahead and re-drag her character onto the map. And the reason why it got lighter is because I have line of sight active and I have her token claimed.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, I thought that the second step is actually putting them you put them on the combat tracker first, then you put them on the party sheet, then you put them on the map.
Correct.
But I guess it depends on if you're using the party sheet.
Correct. The party sheet is another critical step. For a one-shot, you probably don't need the party sheet as much, but for the sake of a tutorial to be complete, yes, you bring the party sheet over here, drag this token over to the party sheet, and now you are complete on getting set up for the campaign. So absolutely. So good point. So Lady Shel reminded me that we want to put that on the combat tracker, and we're going to assume that this is a campaign or something that relies on the party sheet. Now, the other thing here is the movement. So when you are moving now, they have changed the way the graphics look a little bit, and they changed the key that you have to use to emulate movement as a player or a monster or NPC. So before you held down the control key, but what that was doing is not only is it interfering with your push to talk or Discord, but it was also interfering with a function that occurs within the map. So rather than going through that drama, they remapped or rekeyed where you would push as a game master. Now, as a player, you don't have to worry about it. You just move your token where you need to. But if you want to emulate the way a player would move or an NPC monster, you need to hold down the Alt key now. So the map token locking, the emulation that game masters or DMs have to use is now the Alt key. So I'm going to drag her to her 25 feet of movement, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But I have to hold the Alt key, so hold on. So there's her 25 feet of movement. Now there are options that govern this. So if I go to the options menu and you scroll down to the bottom where there's house rules, you can change the way the diagonal distance works. So I had it on raw, which actually gives you the exact number of movement. If you have it on variant, it just gives you the 5 feet movements. And if you have it on standard, it doesn't care if you're moving diagonal or not. It'll just count how many squares that you've moved. It doesn't care if it's diagonal or not. So in standard mode, if I move her 25 feet, so I'm going to cancel this. So in standard mode, if I move her 25 feet diagonally, she'll actually be 35 feet away. And I'll show you what I'm saying. So here it is showing 25 feet. Now, if you go to the map diagonal distance and you change it to variant, it's going to say 35 feet. So technically, she should be back here if you were going to use math and your Pythagorean theorem here. But if you don't care about that, then you're actually moving an extra 10 feet. Now on the raw one, it would show that I've moved, even if I move like back and forth, raw keeps track of the total overall movement. So this might be good for tactical battles and such. The other thing is that they've cleaned up these arrows so they're not as overwhelming and distracting. And they've cleaned up a lot of the code that goes in with moving these waypoints. So you can actually move the waypoints if you needed to move away or move around an object. So let me go back to variant. So if you, instead of going down and up, you can go up and down or whatever. So that's just a way to recalculate your pathway. So that's what these are waypoints. When you stop movement, that's a waypoint. And then you start another direction or another movement, then that's how that forms. And then once you've agreed, let's say that she can, maybe she did a dash move or something, who knows? Maybe she has boots of speed on. So she's going to move 75 feet. So once she's done, the game master will click this check mark. And it completes the move. So that's the updates to the movement. Now the other thing I was going to show is if Lady Shel's character is going to cast a spell, we nearly have to look at where her spells are. And when we look at the spells, we're looking for one that has a radius. So Prayer of Healing is 30 feet. So I'm just going to move her back here. So she says she wants to cast Prayer of Healing. So it's 30 feet. So if you open this up, its range is 30 feet. So that's just how far away you can cast it. That's not really a radius. So protection from, let's see, or silence 120
Turn
feet.
undead is 30 feet.
Right.
things are
But it's not
within.
necessarily a radius.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
it can be,
Yeah.
but it depends on the situation. But in this case, silence is. So the range is 120 feet, but it has a 20-foot radius sphere. So this is what you're looking at. So this is when the radius, the sphere or a cone, or it might be a square, a cube, whatever it is, you can draw these now. And this was available in Classic as well, but they've kind of cleaned it up a little. So if I right click on the map, click pointers, and then I draw in this case, a circle, because it says radius. If you left click and drag, it will create your radius. So I can center this anywhere as 120 feet away. So if I take the center, which is where I'm going to move this from, I can move it up to 120 feet away. The way to do that is to target the individuals in the zone so you have an idea of how far away. Or if you're Hannah, you can say, hey, I want to target it or center it. And then what she'll do is she'll right click on there and click pointers. Instead of doing this, you could do a line. So she can draw this line and tell the DM where she wants to center so that she'll center it on this point within the combat area. And then the game master can take this and move it accordingly. Or she can move this where she wants. So that's where that would go. So this is just an update to pointers that now you have an actual data number attached to the different areas. And it kind of makes it nice to see that. So that's the changes that were made recently to the movement and pointer system within Fantasy Grounds. And I'm sure they'll change it again, but at least it's improving. So that is basically all we had to say on that. So what's the next thing, Shel?
The next thing we were going to talk about is extensions and like what we think maybe are ones that are kind of important to have, or
Okay.
not recommendations either, actually, but ones that maybe are more important than others,
Mm-hmm.
because you can pretty much get an extension to pretty much run your game without you doing anything. And personally, I don't feel that that's playing, I mean, play a video game if you want everything to just work all on its own. I would prefer to do my own thing.
Okay. So what we're talking about is different extensions that help the quality of life and your quality of service when you're playing the games. Right now, I have quite a few extensions, actually. I have only for the sake of illustration. So right now, I have an extension that adds these handy dandy little tokens for spells if there's any available. So I don't have any modules loaded right now, but if I did, these would basically pull themselves in and populate these fields with their own tokens, or I could also drag them over too. So if I go to assets and I go to tokens and I go to the data folder, if you have any custom tokens or anything modular like that, you'll have to load those first. So let me double check my modules and make sure that I have all my required modules. So that's one thing about extensions is some extensions, or at least half of them, require that you have a module loaded as well. So I'm going to click on modules and I'm going to load up a whole bunch of modules that have to do with functionality of the actual tokens. So I'm going to go ahead and load up some that are by different authors that are community members. So here's some by Diablo Bob. And I go ahead and load these up. because I think these are really cool, but they are not essential to play. They are just things to make things a little easier on the Game Master. It's not recommended to load every single extension you find. Okay, so that's that. Now over here, there are some token modules and different things to make your game easier. Now, I don't have anything in particular I want to load here, but if I was going to pick one of Rob2E's modules that's really not an extension, but it is a helpful thing for DMs, it is the conditions and effects. This is almost a do or die thing. What this does is it creates a field up here of different options for you in the effects area. So this is conditions and effect. So this is used for NPCs. So if you have an NPC that's not coded all the way and you need some of these different things like bless or blur or brutal critical hit or counter charm or anything that's not on your NPC stat block, you can drag these over in a pinch and use them. The other thing is you have your conditions as well. So for some reason, if Hiena was prone, I could drag this over. The effect is on her, and she will be at disadvantage for certain things, and the creatures attacking her will be at disadvantage or advantage depending on what they're doing. So if she's laying on the ground prone and you try to shoot her with a bow and arrow, you will actually be at disadvantage because she's on the ground with partial cover. So that's just, it cuts off the angle. So that's basically, the built-in conditions. But if you wanted to have her, under the influence of, let's say, for some reason,
Dwarven ale.
yeah, dwarven ale, you can actually set that up and make it disadvantage. And all that is it would be disadvantage on saves or maybe strength checks, whatever it might be. You have samples of that in here, and you can rename them and just turn them into whatever you want. And you can write your own too once you understand how to do it. But this is not really an extension. This is more of a module, but it's very, very important. The other one that I recommend is there's a font one that used to be called Big Font, and then there was a 14-point font, and then those became incompatible with Classic. And as Unity was coming out, our friend Matakure, who used to be a very prolific instructor here, and he's still a member of our community, he's gone on to making modules and content now, but he's definitely one of our major players in the community. He designed a remake of the font extensions, and those are available on the DMs Guild, or excuse me, the official Fantasy Grounds forums. They're free, and there's 4 or 5 different types. Now you only want to load the ones that are designed for Unity, and one at a time. You don't load both Lado and Montserrat if you're going to use that. And all it really does is it changes the font in the chat window. So this font that pops up in the chat area is a little bit bigger and a little bit more legible. Without it, the letters are kind of like these on the character sheet. And it does not change the character sheet because when you scale the character sheet, it doesn't scale properly on height. So on width, you would be okay. On height, these fields stay the same distance. And if you stretch it, it's not going to take in consideration the different heights and depths of the characters. So if they're too big, it cuts them off. So that's why you cannot just use any old font. And it breaks other things as well. So that's the problem with fonts. So if you scale your screen down too small, then all this stuff scales down. But if you add those third-party extensions that Matt made, Matakire, on the DMs or the official forums. They will help with the chat window, but they don't change any of these fields here. So that's just something to keep in mind. But it's very handy, so it makes it easier to read. So that is my number one. I like the fonts extensions. I think those are the most helpful. My number two would be Rob 2E's condition and effects. By far, that is huge. If I was going to pick anything else, I don't really have too many others that I would recommend or say you have to have. But I think the conditions and effects module and the fonts one is a good start. The trick is that you don't want to get too many modules that do or extensions that do the same thing, because they tend to conflict with each other. And the other thing you have to consider is that you're going to have to go to each individual person's area where they supply or distribute said extensions and modules and update. So every time Fantasy Grounds has a major update or something along those lines, you have to probably re-download it and reinstall it, which generally just means just re-downloading it and installing over what you already have. But then again, they could have renamed the file, so you have to pay attention to what you're downloading and what you're exchanging and swapping out. So most of the time, they'll leave the title the same, and it will just copy over the existing title. Sometimes, though, the author will change the name, like it's revision 2 instead of revision 3. So you want to make sure you have the correct one and you're not just throwing it in the folder. So all extensions folders go in extensions in your main data directory. All modules go in the modules folder. When you come to your session, you have to make sure that if there's any applicable module files associated, that you have those as well. And I have this better module window active right now. And what it does is it gives you a little bit more easily to load and unload modules. So I'm not going to go through how it works, but basically the view that I had in my library and the modules view, that is what gave me all those different lists, like where I was able to force the player load. And instead of having all the fancy icons, I just have these little representation. That's so you can actually see more of these instead of all the little thumbnails and graphics and things like that. So that is just a different way of viewing the data. There is a load and unload list. So when you have this load and unload list, that's what this is. This plus and minus is where you would adjust that. So there's instructions on how to use these things usually too. So make sure you read those before you start actually incorporating them into your game. I actually recommend that you play around with them in a different session until you understand how they work. Because that's the other half of it, is you have to kind of know how Fantasy Grounds works in order to fully understand and utilize what it is you're getting and how it affects your game. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize when they're first starting out, is if something's broken, disable your extensions first. That's usually the first thing you do when you troubleshoot. So right now, I don't have any tokens, but let's see what we got here. So critically awesome tools, we got that. There's a couple cool ones I would probably try to look at. There's some player tools that allows you to stack tokens, and like if you had a boat and you wanted to put your players in it and stack them inside the boat and move the boat, you could do that. There's the one-click druid, which allows you to take a druid character. Once you put them on the combat tracker, it allows you to transform the token and the stats on the character sheet, so you don't have to distribute an NPC animal to use. There is portals, which is pretty cool. I think I can show that. So the portals is basically a module that Diablo Bob put together that allows you to transport between two maps or two places. So let's just say I'm going to set this up. This is a black dragon with a couple kobolds. They're on the battle map now. Lady Shel is kind of scared now because there's a black dragon and his
I'm
minions.
not scared. I'm drunk, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's right. She's just like, oh, hey there. So there's the black dragon. So we have to get her out of here. So she doesn't know this, but there's a wizard nearby that's going to open a portal for her to let her escape. So I'm going to plot her movement to move from where she's at close to the dragon as if she's going to attack it. So I'll go ahead and do that.
I wanted to mention that because Unity is still in beta, that sometimes these things break. I believe that this particular module is working at the time, but if it doesn't, it's not Unity's fault. I mean, they keep making changes, and poor Diablo Bob, he's making all the changes to everything, and then something changes, and then he has to fix it again. So,
Yep.
anyway, hopefully it works now.
So be patient with it. That's what we're trying to say is, it's going to happen. So I'm going to click on portals. Now, this is something I should have set up before the session. Okay. So there's a portals toolbox. That's new. But I'm going to go ahead and open up a new portal or make a new portal. So I'm going to call this Hannah's Retreat.
Send me back to Hailhold.
And you could assign a fancy picture for it, but I'm not going to get into it right now. And it's going to be exit only. So it's only going to allow her to leave the map, not actually go back and forth. It's friendlies only. So only friendlies will be allowed to use the portal. And you can put a prompt here which says, hey, do you want to leave or escape? And then there's a force selection here. I'm just going to go ahead and set this up for right now. So that is basically the portal. You come up here to the tools and okay. So there's that. And I would probably put this on the map somewhere so I remember how it works. And then what you do is your map link is going to go here. So I would have had to have set this up before. But basically you would put your map in here ahead of time. So if I go to my maps and images, I would set the map up and then the portal would be available to me. But once you set these up between all your different maps, you'll be able to transport and teleport between one location to the next. And if you want instructions on how this works, you go to the story entry, or you can actually go to the library and click on the portals supplement and go to the reference manual. And this will show you how this is set up. So this is how you create portals. You create the drag method. So you open the map, click the portal edit toolbar button, left click and drag an area on the map that defines a region, and it will release once you let go of the mouse. And then you link the portals together. So let's see what that shows here. So we go back to the map. And there was, I think this might have been for Classic, but you had a drop-down menu. Oh, maybe it's a right-click now. But you could draw, you could draw out your area, stretch it, and then it would make the zone where the actual portal is. So the scope of this is to just kind of talk about the different options that you might have for Fantasy Grounds, not to go through all the extensions. So that's basically another extension that I kind of like. Takes a little getting used to, and I haven't used it in a while, so I have to go back through the instructions. But nonetheless, it is pretty cool. The other one is the critically essential tools, player tools. What this does is gives you token stacks. You can resolve a token stack. So if you can't move something, you can right click on it. There's spell tokens. So you can actually add spell tokens on your character sheet, and you navigate to the Actions tab. Click on the spyglass symbol to expand the spell. Then right click on a spell and choose Add Action. And then on the Chose part where you can pick your token. So in other words, Prayer of Healing. If you expand this, you can actually add the action that comes from, you have to have Rob 2E's coding spell effects enabled. Some of these extensions and modules rely on others, so that's another thing that you have to keep in mind. So if I go to Rob 2E's coding effects, I'm going to enable or load. And these are for characters, so I have racial traits, feats, spells, so on and so forth. And as you can see, these they've popped up now with this window. So if you drag over a spell like healing, it will add the token. So let me see if we have that. So just for the sake of, here's the healing word. Is healing a first or second level spell?
Healing word is level 1.
No, healing itself, or cure wounds.
I don't. Cure wounds is level 1 also.
Okay. So I'm going to find cure wounds.
Probably under my domain spells.
Yep. Well, what do you know? There it is. Okay, so here's cure wounds. Now what you could do is right click on it, and you're going to add another action. But you're going to add a token, not a actual function, but a token action. And all it does is it sets up the spell token part of things. Then when you edit this, when you click on this, you're going to pick, which is this little magnifying glass. So stretch this out so you can see it. Then you're going to pick the spell token, and in this case, it could be a circle, if it's a radius, or whatever. But you can change it to a measurement, a size, and in this case, it'd probably be radius, or maybe it's not, this depends. And then you would pick your token.
It's touch.
Yeah, this one's touch, but there are other ones that have radius. So
Yeah,
this
the
one
healing
doesn't.
word would have been better because
Yeah,
that's a
radius.
range one.
Okay, but anything with a radius or anything that can be shown could potentially have a token. And if you have all these things lined up and loaded and when you start creating characters, you can actually, it'll add all this stuff, some of it automatically. And in this case, since this character was already built, it's not going to necessarily uh, do that. But this is a target spell. So she has to cast it on a target, and it's not radius or anything like that. And if I had spell tokens, let me go to my assets. Pretty sure I do. So that's, but basically, these are the things that enhance the game, but they are not required. And they take a little bit of experience and some research and time to get used to using them. But as a game master, you want to get to know the game better and how it works before you start adding all this extra stuff. It's cool. It's very pleasing to the eye, but it's very confusing if you don't understand how Fantasy Grounds works. And it can slow your game down even more if you don't know what you're doing. So that's the thing about them, is you kind of have to be a little bit more, more educated before you start using them. And even I don't even know how half of them work. So if I go to any of my assets, like if I had spell tokens, I think if I go here and actually look for spell tokens, I can probably come up with a folder that has a bunch of spell tokens in it. As a matter of fact, I know I have some somewhere. I've added so many spell tokens, I don't even know where to start. But you can assign tokens for your spells, and as your, especially like spiritual hammer, I mean that's a really good one to look at, because that one you can actually move it and it has range, and you'll be able to tell where it is, and it's just a fun way to use the spell. So while that's searching and loading, what's our next topic, Lady Shel?
Oh, I pushed the wrong button. Let's see. We are going to talk about, well, you already said about following the author on the forum or wherever you got your extension for updates if you are going to use extensions. The last thing we were going to discuss was purchasing new content. Where is the content? And depending on if you bought it from the Fantasy Grounds store or a third-party site.
All right, so for like artwork and tokens, those can come from any number of places. You can make your own. You can buy them directly from the artist's website, or sometimes they'll sell collections at like Drive Through RPG or the DM's Guild or even Roll20 Asset Store. Anywhere that you can buy tokens and art is fine, especially in Unity. You can use most of that stuff now without too much problems. Just keep the file sizes down and the amount. You don't want to have 50,000 tokens like I do. It really slows Fantasy Grounds down. As you can tell, my Fantasy Grounds through all my assets because I have 50 million tokens, so it's really slowing it down because it has to curse through my hard drive and check every file to see what it is. So, but you can get all those, and there's two places that you add those. You can add them as a module, which you'll have to make it, or it has to come that way. Or if you add them loosely, you can add folders within your master data folder for tokens to organize them. And that will mean that they are available for all your different campaigns. Or you can go into each individual campaign and add unique tokens for just that setting. Same thing with artwork for handouts and maps. You can either buy them as a pack that's already bundled, you just load it and it's ready to go, or you can buy individual maps and put them in your campaign folder, or you can put them in your master folder if you want to use them more than once. You want to keep the file sizes down. You don't really want anything greater than 2000 by 2000. I mean, that's going to fill most of your screen. So when you get any larger than that and you're using Fantasy Grounds, it's not only going to be slower for your players, but you're going to be scrolling around like crazy. Oh, here we go. So here's my tokens that I could potentially use for. But you want to be very careful with how many of these images that you have and tokens. As you can see, I'm having difficulties with it because I have way too many. I probably got over 600 different spell tokens. The main thing is, though, when you buy content, is try to keep it to a minimum if you can. Don't go out and buy 50,000 things and expect all those to work. You need to kind of go through them and be picky and choosy. When you have maps, if they're too big, you probably want to resize them. Make sure that they are, JPEG or low level or lower resolution, or if you can get away with it, maybe you go up to a medium resolution PNG file. But there again, you have to push that to your players. So if they have bad connections or old computers, it may cause theirs to crash, even though it works on yours. So you got to be careful what you're pushing to your players. The other thing is tokens should be of a uniform size. We do have an article on our website that gives you the older recommended file sizes and dimensions in our knowledge base so that you have a good starting point. Now, Unity will let you use higher quality images, but I would say step up from low to about medium quality. If you go up to super high resolution images, you're just going to get grief from your players. Might work great for you on your table or if you're just playing around a table at home, but when you're actually playing online, you want to keep your assets down and you want to keep the level of quality to probably no higher than medium. So that includes file size and resolution. So if normally you're only allowed to use 1 to 2 megabytes for a map in Classic, I would say for Unity, don't go up more than 10 megs or something per map. I think that's a good, starting point, and it's enough resolution where if you zoom in, it's not going to be too blurry. Other than that, you're just kind of being excessive, and especially on your players, because they may not have as good of a computer or internet speed as you. So it really chokes things down and makes it difficult to navigate around.
I have some questions.
Sure.
Sardek wants to know, is 96 dpi resolution okay, or do you need to use a 300 dpi for good image quality? I think you just
I
said
think,
that, though, didn't you?
yeah, 96 is decent. I think 96 or 100 is what I call that. That's a good happy medium. Anywhere between 60 and 150, I would think, is a really good happy medium. 300 is unnecessary. There's really not too much reason for that. The only time I'd ever use 300 DPI is if I was making a screenshot for a professional product or something. Like if I was going to sell it or make a money off it or something, that might be when I use high quality images. When it comes to playing, I think 100 DPI per inch, or that's for 5 foot square, is good enough.
Dots per inch.
Yep.
96 dpi dots per inch.
Yep.
We have
Uh,
one more question.
sure.
Fail and Twin Bear wants to know, how does that work when buying bundles through the store? Should those already be sorted by campaign?
It depends. So campaigns usually come with their own tokens. So yes, those will be segregated and added to that specific campaign. However, if you buy a pack of goblins, those are going to be separate and they'll be in their own module or they'll be loose. However, I don't know, it depends on who you buy them from. If that's the case, then you have to assign those manually to substitute whatever you have. So if you have a goblin and it just has a token that says G instead of an actual picture, you will be able to sub those out when you edit your NPCs. But usually you'll have to make copies of the NPCs before you can edit them. So that's a whole nother story. But It depends. So if you buy a module, anything unique to that module, if there is any tokens, should be segregated in that campaign folder. If it's things that you bought third party to supplement what you already have, you'll probably have to manually assign those. So that's the best answer I can give you.
I think that was the last thing
Okay.
that we were going to talk about. Do we have any other questions? If you have a question, please type it in the chat window and we'll answer it.
Zardak said, cool, I resized all my maps to just under 1 meg. Thanks for the advice. Yeah, so if you're using Classic still, that's a good thing. The only problem with resizing maps is sometimes they lose their squareness. So in other words, if there's already a layer painted on top of it, which would typically be your grid, it could distort the grid. So if you distort the grid, when you go to overlay your lines on top of it, it's harder to do. So it's better if you find maps that don't already have the grid painted on it. And that's
But maps are next week, or not
yep,
next week, but our next session, I believe we were going to be talking about maps and the beginning of maybe
yep,
some map tool
yep,
teaching.
yep. We'll talk a little bit about maps, at least the basic parts that are like we're going to use the map tools like Classic next time we use it. We're not going to get into building line of sight and using the brushes and all that stuff. We're just going to do the real basic stuff, like how to use it as opposed to how to make it. So is there any other questions on what we're talking about today? I think we've yapped for a good hour or so.
Yeah, we're an hour and 10 already.
All right.
We thank you for coming, and we will be posting this to our YouTube page during the week after it's edited, and so you can look for it there if you missed any of what we talked about earlier. And we thank you for coming.
And don't forget that it's also VOD on Twitch. So as soon as this thing renders inside Twitch, it'll be available to watch again. If you subscribe to this channel, or not even subscribe, but if you just follow the channel, you'll be able to have access to all the videos past and present, and you can watch them from here, or like she said, you can go on YouTube and watch them. What's coming up this week, Shel?
Um, Actually, next weekend we're going to be having our Spooktober event, and we're looking for people to play in our games. We have about 14 games, I believe, that are still looking for players. We have D&D games, but we also have a Pathfinder game, a Savage Worlds game, and there are 2 Vampire the Masquerade games that we hope to get some players for. So if you're looking for some games to play in, next weekend is when you should be doing that, and that would be this Friday and Saturday, which is the 16th and 17th of the month.
Or B Square? We have our sign up method set up already. Lady Shell's made a separate web page to show you how to sign up for those. We have it posted all over our social media, in the Fantasy Grounds forums, on Reddit, all over the place. So if you come into our community, if you're not already a member, our join link is here in our description of this Twitch page, and plastered all over our internet site, and it's all over the place. So you should be able to find our Discord. Join Discord, then join our website, and then join our games and our classes.
And I just posted the Discord invite. If you are not already a member of our Discord, there you go.
There you
We
go.
just invited you.
Thanks, Shel. And then also down below, there's join on Discord. If you scroll down from the main screen, and we have our patron site, we have a place for supporter tips. So if you want to donate, you can do that. And then we have our Discord members right now. We've got about almost 2,700 people active right now. Not all at once, of course. And then we also have other things like our viewers and such. So Take care, everyone. Hopefully, this helps you guys out.
And
Bye bye.
I will post the link to if you don't know how to sign up for Spooktober, if you're not a member currently, this is the link on our website that you will get all the information. And again, thank you for coming, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Bye bye.